Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. I'm your host, Matt Barrie, and what a Saturday we had. We are finally learning who is who and what is what. We had Tennessee going into Norman, planting that good old Rocky Top flag right in the middle of the field, figuratively saying, you know what? Talk about Georgia, talk about Texas, talk about Alabama. You best be paying attention to us in the SEC. We'll get into the Volunteers getting the win. Utah and Oklahoma State, the first Big 12 game of the year. Utah behind a true freshman quarterback, a Wilson nonetheless, goes into Stillwater, holds on for a win. We've got some clarity there. And out of nowhere, Michigan finds a way to resurrect their season against USC, getting the win at home in a Big Ten game at the Big House. You love to see that. Also, Billy Napier quiets the critics. Mac Brown. What did Mac Brown say after the game? And you can't forget Coach Prime late night in a Hail Mary thriller at Colorado. All of that coming up on the Matt Barrie Show here, presented by Allstate on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. But now it is time to check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate. Oh, it's my favorite part of the week. I mean, it really is genuinely when I come in sleep deprived, bedhead for everybody to see, coming off college football final and a busy week. Four as we check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate. All right, Paul, for those that listen to the program, and there are many, you know that I've been bullish on Tennessee being a team that we had better pay attention to in the hierarchy, not only of the SEC, but in the country. And look what they did last night. They went into Norman. The score was closer than it really was. But Josh Heupel right now has, by the way, your alma mater playing really good football as we embark on October.
Yeah, what's so interesting, Matt, is that they didn't really play flawlessly. It was a little bit like the NC State game, which now we can't read anything into. But they were sloppy at times. They turned the ball over, but they still really handled a blue chip opponent with ease on the road. And I think that was the one thing. Tennessee has just been a disaster on the road in the past, and now they got on the road and they proved they can win. And yeah, I mean, they now no longer look like a fringe playoff team. They look like a definite playoff team and maybe a fringe championship team.
So, and I say this knowing that Alabama people will go scorched earth, but it's only because we're about to learn about Alabama the following week against Georgia. We'll get into that in a minute. But right now, based on body of work, I'd still put Georgia 1. I'd put Texas right behind them at 2 in the SEC. Then for now, because of body of work, I'd put Tennessee 3 above Alabama at 4 in the hierarchy in the league, and then maybe Ole Miss 5. But that could all change. But that speaks to what Josh Heupel has done at this Tennessee program that was left for dead after the Jeremy Pruitt disaster. You just need, Paul, one of those really big moments to convince people that Tennessee, who when they're good is great for college football, can be one of those teams again nationally.
You said something really important there, because I'll never forget. It was a cold January day. I was on Sports Center with you, talking about the firing of Jeremy Pruitt and the hiring of Josh Heupel. And at the time, Matt, nobody really knew. It almost didn't matter because the program looked like it was dead,
Yeah.
because of the NCAA charges. But he really is. He's been masterful, and I think it was just interesting to see him back in his old environment. Those people in Norman Saturday night. We're going, man, we fired this guy and now he's somewhere else beating us.
Mhm.
And it's, Tennessee's, everybody in the SEC has their interesting schedule, but not only does Alabama have to deal with Georgia this weekend, but they have to deal with Tennessee in about 3 weeks in
Yeah.
Knoxville. And I always thought that was the most critical game for Tennessee, but I'm not sure. I think that might be the most critical game for Alabama if they can't get by Georgia.
Yeah, and it's all starting to round into shape because, we sit here and we talk about the first month of the season. There's been a couple of big matchups, but really everyone's scheduling their paycheck games. And Tennessee really was the first of the big SEC heavyweights to dip their toe into a conference game. I know Georgia took care of Clemson week 1, and that was kind of their big win of the year. But Tennessee, you got to look at them now as we move forward into October. It's like, all right, who are they playing? They were 6 coming into the game. They're probably going to stay right around there. You got to look at the rankings and everything that happened in front of them. There were no major upsets. But conversely, Paul, it was a day where you saw some of these new schools in their new conference, Oklahoma in their SEC debut. People are now wondering this morning with Brent Venables and the Sooners, what is it going to take now that they've had a taste of SEC football for 1 week? What's it going to take for Oklahoma to be one of those programs we're talking about week in and week out?
Well, they're going to have to return to quarterback play like they had, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, things like that, because they don't have that right now. The one thing for Oklahoma, a lot has been made where I live about this weekend being their first road game in the SEC, where they picked a good place to go, because they've got they're going to see a team Saturday at Auburn who has more problems than they do. But I think it's going to be a struggle. I interviewed a guy in Norman the other day, Matt, who said, I really think this looks like a 7-5 team. And I've kept trying to boost them up, knowing I had a lot of public relations visits in Norman this year, but it's not easy to boost them up anymore. I mean, this team is not going to the playoffs. I think they're somewhere between 7-5 and 8-4, which is going to be enough to get them to next year. And then the questions will start being asked to Brent Venables.
Right. And you mentioned the quarterback play. Jackson Arnold, he was the third ranked recruit in the country coming out. I believe it was year 22, 23. And he ended up getting benched last night, which is, I think, one of the more surprising developments. But Tennessee, look, here they are. Oklahoma's going to have to learn real quick what it's like to be a part of the SEC culture. And you brought it up. I wasn't going to really dive into it, but let's because Hugh Freeze, they lose to Arkansas. And that was a battle. And let's be really blunt about this. Sam Pittman's the one coming into the season fighting for his job. Hugh Freeze is only in year 2, so he has time to build that thing. But Sam Pittman goes into Jordan-Hare, gets the win. And then afterwards, Hugh Freeze is again at the podium talking about the quarterback play. And to me, that's the most surprising part, Paul, that this is a coach who prides himself on making a quarterback really relevant and good. And it just hasn't happened for him in year 2. Robbie Ashford's out there making plays at South Carolina. Paul, this is a bit surprising.
Everything about this Auburn program has been baffling. A couple weeks ago, Hugh Freeze replaced Peyton Thorne. And I know a lot of Auburn fans were ready to throw the QB under the bus, but it was so weird the way it happened, Matt. It just felt like somebody whispered in his ear. And now that he doesn't really know what to do with the quarterback situation. I don't know if you saw this because you were up until the wee hours, but remember Bo Wallace? He was a pretty fair quarterback under Hugh Freeze.
Yes.
Maybe one of the most memorable wins in the history of modern SEC football. Well, Bo Wallace tweeted last night. This guy's a legend, by the way. He beat Alabama on the famous Katy Perry day. He said we're approaching the point that he's, meaning Hugh Freeze, thrown so many QBs under the bus that maybe no one wants to play for him. I mean, this is going to be a big story. And Hugh Freeze has not been artful in his description of his players this year. He said last week that we as a coaching staff only made one mistake in offensive execution. It's too early to write him off. He's 4 games into his second season, but I know a lot of Auburn fans who are getting very nervous. They fired Brian Harsin after 2 years, paid him $19 or $20 million to go away, and the product is no better. And Hugh Freeze looks disheveled and confused at times, and like, there's almost something going off in his head. Like, do I really want to be here? And take the $9 or $10 million a year and be at a major SEC program. I realize Auburn is not on the radar at the moment.
Yeah,
but Auburn is always where there is more drama and soap opera antics than any other place. And one more thing, Matt, the offensive coordinator on the other side of the ball in 2003 was offered the Auburn job while the sitting head coach was Tommy Tuberville was getting ready for Alabama. It got out in the media, and they had to. They ended up firing the president, the AD, and pretty much everyone else. And Tuberville the next year went undefeated. You may remember, and didn't get a chance to play for the championship.
Cadillac and Ronnie Brown. I remember that team.
Yeah, no, it's just one of the. But I realize Auburn is only interesting in usually the Shakespearean mode. But knowing the way the sausage is cooked down there, I guarantee you there were a lot of boosters up late last night going, what have we gotten ourselves into?
You know, that you bring it up, the tweet from Bo, I mean, that it was a scathing tweet, and you usually don't get that out of players who have had success under the coach. Players are usually protective of their coaches, but yeah, I mean, and by the way, we haven't really dove into this one because the season started and there's other things to talk about. But is that not the SEC in a nutshell, where Bobby Petrino, who was carted out of Fayetteville on a motorcycle and a neck roll and scabs, is back on the sidelines for a coach coaching ball at a place where he's been the head coach with a coach that's on the hot seat, and they've got a really good quarterback in Taylor Green, and they're just winning games.
And the biggest story of the offseason in Arkansas was bringing Petrino back. And he probably, and listen, not to go back a couple of weeks, but Arkansas threw away the game at Oklahoma State.
Yep.
Had it not been for that, they'd be undefeated right now and sitting very pretty. But again, these are just the dramas. And yesterday, yeah, it was an unusual day where obviously the biggest game turned out to be what looked like the Rose Bowl, didn't it? Watching
Yeah.
it was fun.
That was my segue into it, because we'll get to Oklahoma State because they lost to Utah, who's a big newcomer in the Big 12. But
Yeah.
you know, I said that earlier on Sunday, Bloody Sunday, that it wasn't in Pasadena. It wasn't January 1st. I think we're all excited about the realignment for now. But Michigan, USC being a conference game, that's just weird to me. But it was a great watch.
Yeah, with Gary Danielson doing the color, I just thought, what happened? Shouldn't this be Georgia, Alabama? And it was a great game. I mean, forget the sloppiness and all the mistakes, and clearly, I came away with more respect for Lincoln Riley and USC than I previously had. They're formidable. I don't know. Where they go from here, but Michigan really saved the season. That was a defining moment for Sharon Moore after we wrote them off. And my biggest takeaway had nothing to do with those two schools. It had everything to do with the fact that Texas had gone in there a couple of weeks ago and beaten them so badly, which makes me even more impressed with Texas.
So wait a second. Hold the coffee and the Bloody Marys and the energy drinks here. You came out of that with more respect for Lincoln Riley than that. To me is let's lead with that. I thought for sure you'd come at him today.
No, I mean, listen, I did a good job of writing him off before the season. So I mean, I'm impressed that they have a defense that, yeah, I know what happened at the end of the game, but that is not unusual. I still felt like he's got a good football team though. It feels almost complete, not totally, but almost. And I think if they can go in there, that's not Ohio State, that's not Oregon.
Right.
I've got a question mark, but it's still, I came away feeling a lot better. And that's not me pandering, because I don't really care that much for Lincoln Riley. It's not like I'm trying to get invited to his house for coffee. I'm just trying to make a statement that contradicts one I made about 2 months ago.
I would agree with you though, because look, we said this, being a Pac-12 guy born and raised, I said, look, there's a different athlete in the Big Ten. It's a different kind of player, right? Everything in the Big Ten, maybe save Ohio State, because they've recruited differently throughout the years. But Michigan, big, strong, north-south physical isn't exactly what you get in California, which is athlete 7-on-7 type style football. And they went in there physically, came back in a game where they were down 14-0. And fought with them every step of the way. So I'm with you. Look, USC, I thought USC would win because Michigan hadn't had any offense. They went to Orgy. He had 32 yards passing, but it was clear who Michigan was going to be yesterday. And I'm with you. USC is a team that when they figure out like what it's going to take to win the Big Ten outside of the Pacific schools that joined, I think it's going to be fun to watch them play football. Realignment talk continues. How about the big ACC game between Cal and Florida State? And Mike Norvell gets the win. Billy Napier, Florida, on the road, and Starkville gets the win. So the two Florida programs that have been bleeding the last couple of weeks came out victorious.
Yeah, and Napier, I don't think that changed his status at all. There are a lot of reports out there that in terms of what's next. I don't think anybody wants to fire him yet. I think that's really they prefer to fire him later than earlier. So that was a big win. It also just showed you how dysfunctional that Mississippi State program is. If you can lose to what have they already lost to? Arizona? Is it Arizona or Arizona State? I can't remember.
Come on, Paul. They lost to the Sun Devils,
Okay, they lost to the Sun Devils. They've lost to Toledo.
who
Uh,
lost yesterday.
and now this game, and guess what they get, and they Texas gets them in a couple of weeks, or so. I mean, you know, Mississippi State's really traveling well. Ultimately, though, I don't think Florida's situation has changed at all as far as Norvell. Everybody's having open season on him. I think he goes quietly the rest of the year and he tries to figure it out.
Yeah, look. We sat here last week thinking and wondering if Billy Napier was going to be gone by the end of the week. There were multiple stories out this week
Oh, yeah.
about how, he's safe, vote of confidence, got Strickland, everybody in between. It's been a weird week in Gainesville, which to me was the perfect week for them to get Mississippi State because Graham Mertz looked good. Like Florida
Yeah.
looked good. I mean, they look good.
Well, I don't. Their problem is that they have not even gotten to the tough games on the schedule yet.
Yeah.
And I say that 'cause I know Miami is now everybody's favorite pet, but we didn't know that going into the season. But Florida still has in the first half of the season UCF, a game that they could ill afford to lose, and then they're at Tennessee. We know what's going to happen there, and then they get that gauntlet of everyone who is anyone, and so the numbers game still doesn't play well for them. But we just won't be talking about Florida for a couple of weeks, so Napier gets to breathe more easily.
I know you were on air when this happened, but by chance, did you see the Nick Saban clip from College GameDay
Yeah.
about him talking about Florida? And I sit next to a former Florida offensive coordinator and head coach every week for the last 2 years. And he wouldn't say this publicly because, fans will write it off as an excuse. But when Nick Saban says it, people listen. Florida under Urban Meyer, he's 100% right. And you know this better than anyone. They weren't investing in the program. They weren't investing in facilities. They weren't investing in everything that makes the program. They were investing in Florida history behind Steve Spurrier, and it finally caught up with them. And now they're paying for it. Now they've got everything. They've got facilities. The money's been raised when Mullen was there. But Paul, this was something that's been in the making for quite some time because Florida was relying on yesteryear instead of how to catch up.
By the way, you became a topic on our show this last week, Matt. A couple of Florida callers were not very happy with your comments about they shouldn't have fired Dan Mullen. But I'll leave it to you to debate with the Finebaum caller some other time. But your point was a good one though. And it takes Nick Saban to confirm everything that's already been said. Isn't that the new world that we live in?
Yeah, but thanks, Coach, for backing us up. But you know why I think Florida fans are getting angry about it? Because I think there's a small piece of them that knows that maybe we're right about the Mullen thing. Look, obviously I've been around the guy for 2 years and we work closely together. And so I'm hearing his side of the story. But ultimately, at the end of the day, do you think there's a little bit of them that understand, like, wait a second? Because, okay, let's put this in current day context, Paul. This would be like Florida or Florida State in the next couple of weeks firing Mike Norvell.
Yeah.
After a 10-win season, a 13-win season, just being like, you know what? It's not going well this year. He's not recruiting well, which was the knock on Mullen. It was all portal. Like, let's just fire Norvell. It'd be the same thing. Well,
no, you're right. And if you fire Mullen, and it came out over the weekend that Dan, you know this, of course, but Dan Mullen had recommended to Scott Strickland to hire Lane Kiffin. And it was interesting that I happened to be in Baton Rouge when I read that and talking to people close to those who made the decision to bring in Brian Kelly. And remember, a lot of people were advocating hire Billy Napier's right down the road at
Yep.
Lafayette. And people close to the administration in Baton Rouge told me over the weekend they were not coming anywhere near Billy Napier. And why? Because they did not have faith in his ability to make the right decision staffing wise. They felt like he was too much of a neophyte, having only been in the Sun Belt. His record at Alabama, he got a lot of cred for being on Nick Saban's staff, but it's worth remembering Nick Saban bypassed him twice to be the offensive coordinator, which led to him leaving there. I think he went west.
Arizona State, yeah.
Right. So they felt pretty comfortable. They were making the right decision, even though there was a couple of columnists down there saying, you got to hire Billy Napier. He's one of us. And Napier wasn't equipped to handle that job. And that's why I think he's been mostly a failure. And back to your argument, had Mullen stuck around another year or two, I don't know anything more than you know, but it would not have been, it couldn't have been any worse. I promise you.
Yeah, it's been the topic of conversation, really, because Mullen's sitting there on Saturdays. He's very prominent on TV, and Florida people come out lashing, saying, you don't know what happened inside the program. He quit on the team out. I mean, they should have kept Dan Mullen's out of story anymore because of what's going on. But with Billy Napier, as this thing goes on, we'll see how he finishes it up the rest of the season. I do want to stick with SEC before we pivot quickly. The big one, Georgia and Alabama. This is really Kalen DeBoer's opportunity to let everyone know that Alabama's just going to be just fine minus Nick Saban. Saban and GameDay are going to be there. Kirby Smart after Kentucky, they get the bye week. I mean, Paul, this is really setting up to be the game of the year to this point, just based on the storylines coming in.
Yeah, and if the dynamics of the game perceptibly, and that's all you can talk about really, unless you want to start breaking it down, which I'm not going to. 3 weeks ago, Georgia looked like this game was in the bag, and now it's completely reversed because of how poorly Georgia played. And what we saw at Kentucky, I don't think was an aberration. I mean, they've got serious injury problems. They lost Rutledge, one of probably their best linemen offensively. That's a big deal with Carson Beck having a shaky game against the Wildcats. They're missing some key components on the defensive side. And from an edge standpoint, yeah, I'm sure Kirby Smart was able to get in there and get their attention, but that's all nonsense anyway, because they've had this game circled since December. You don't need another edge. This game is about Alabama, and there's a chance Alabama is really scary good.
Yeah.
I don't know because they really haven't played anyone, and that includes Wisconsin, but. A lot of things favor them. Probably the biggest story going into this weekend. I don't want to be Jim. What's the guy at the Weather Channel? Jim Cantrell.
Jim Cantori. Respects Cantori, sir.
Sorry, Cantori. I'm not good with names. There's a hurricane coming up the Gulf, and it's supposed to go straight through Alabama at some point next week. So that's got a lot of people uncomfortable because if it is rainy, if it is windy, it's going to change the game.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on the forecast, weather on the fives throughout the week. Maybe Paul and I will get on here and give you a daily weather forecast.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see that one. It's going to be fantastic.
With Jim Cantrell and Jim Cantori.
Yeah, Cantrell and Cantori. You put those two weather guys together and you've got weather gods. Two others. Did you see the end of the Colorado game and Coach Prime and Shador? I mean, let's like your schedule on Get Up and First Take this week is going to be so busy because now Colorado's 3-1, Paul.
And I want to make it clear, my criticism of Prime has primarily been off the field. This has been his comments. I mean, they are the most entertaining team in the country, and that was just simply beyond words what we saw there. And I think what it did, it brought Travis Hunter back into serious Heisman consideration. I mean, he made the play of the game, even though it wasn't the one everybody's talking about.
Yeah, I don't think there's any debate on that. We have fun with the Prime thing, because Prime's very vocal off the field, but you can debate whether or not he's building a team, a brand, or a program. That's fine. What you can't debate, and Paul just alluded to it there, Travis Hunter is the best player in college football. He's the best two-way player in college football, and it was again shown last night. And so now, Paul, you look at their schedule. I think people had the Baylor game as a win coming in. Baylor's kind of down with Dave
All right.
Aranda, even though Baylor had a chance to win that game, and it's inexcusable to let a guy get behind you twice in a Hail Mary situation. But now Prime next week, they go to UCF, Coach Boom Bounce House. That'll be one, like they get that win. Now you got to start, they're 4-1. I mean, that's going to be a fun one to watch with both of those two.
Yeah, and listen, I'm a fan of the excitement. My biggest beef last week wasn't with Prime; it was with Stephen A. Smith defending Prime. So
Well,
I can live with that.
get ready because you're about to do it again because you're going to get a full dose of Stephen A. I told you so this week.
Yeah, but that's fair. Listen, I want the critics out there to know. I'll speak for you too, Matt. We love college football. We really don't care what you say as long as you're talking.
Yeah, I drew the ire of Ohio State fans because I tweeted a little joke on Friday night when Kyle McCord was playing well for Syracuse. He said
Yeah.
Kyle McCord's Ohio State's best quarterback. Boy, you'd have thought. I mean, it was they like that's what I love about the fan bases. They find anything, whether we're having fun or not, and attack.
And Matt, if I can say something about Ohio State,
Yeah.
I've always been a big fan of that administration up there, but I mean, what we've seen from Ohio State this year is really beyond words. The fact that they took the road less traveled, that they played the worst non-conference schedule I have seen. And Georgia had a reason for it last year, if you remember. They had that game with Oklahoma that
Yeah.
they had. Can someone explain what Ohio State's reason and rationale has been this year?
Well, let's look at their schedule while you're talking about it.
Yeah.
Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall. That's not a gauntlet.
I mean, it's just, I mean, we're seeing, I was with Brian Kelly Saturday, and he played UCLA, which is not that big a deal, but it's still better than any of those three. He played USC. We've seen all the other games, Florida, Miami, and Georgia, Clemson. I mean, that is laughable. I mean, this what Ohio State has done is truly a travesty. And I know they won't be held accountable because they'll run the table with maybe more with either no losses or one loss, and it won't matter. But it's still embarrassing, and it's really it's a complete and total ripoff of the fan base, the Ohio State fans who support the program. Now, Ohio State fans, most of the ones I meet, really they're like sheep. I mean, you can just lead them anywhere. You can lead them to slaughter, and they'll say, "Thank you, sir. May I have another?" But I would be up in arms at the money you have to spend to support a program like that, especially with a $20 million payroll last year, to have those type of garbage games on my home schedule.
Yeah, so now they go on the road for the first time next week at Michigan State, year one, Jonathan Smith. And then 2 weeks in a row, really, I mean, 4 weeks in a row, if you really look at it, home against Iowa, and Iowa minus Cyhawk in the loss to Iowa State. They look different this year. They can run the ball. They're always going to play defense. So Iowa will get to learn a lot about them. Then there's the big one, October 12th at Oregon, which is really going to be the game of the year for them until Michigan. Because look, here's what Ohio State does do with their soft schedule. And we've seen this with some other teams early on. And Ole Miss has been good about this as well because their schedule had been great. They at least beat the hell out of the teams that they should, So
yeah, I mean that's fine. I just think of all the fans I run into at airports every Friday morning, and one from Ohio State this week was berating me, and I'm like going, "What have you guys done?" I mean, you've lost to Michigan 3 straight years, and you're playing some middle schools basically to get ready for your Big Ten schedule.
Yeah, and we'll see what they do with the Big Ten schedule. But I still believe, and even now, and I'd say this, Paul, going into the season, we thought Georgia best, most talented. I don't think it's disputable right now. I think Ohio State, roster-wise, the most talented team in the country. Can
Absolutely.
they put that to work when it starts? We'll find out here. Get to know. We're going to end this one, Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate. Paul, we love him. He was a former colleague. He had Texas going in his heyday as one of the most historic double-digit win runs we've ever seen in college football. Did you see what happened in North Carolina and Mac Brown yesterday? And did you hear what Mac allegedly said post-game, then walked it back after hanging 70, letting JMU hang 70 on them at home?
Yeah, I'm going to get in trouble here because we one of the greatest experiences I've had in television has been with you and Mac Brown on Sunday morning, doing Sports Center. And he's one of the great people. But uh, Mac, when you lose to JMU, don't joke about uh, walking away because your fans will take you seriously and hope that you follow suit. I'm not going to tell Mac Brown what to do because he's beloved by his athletic director, as you know.
Yep.
I've had Bubba Cunningham tell me repeatedly, I am lucky to have Mac Brown as my coach. Well, I'm not so sure that's accurate anymore because he does this every year, Matt. He throws away a game, and I don't know enough about JMU to say that that they don't deserve respect. They probably do. I mean, I know they've been a named program for a long time, but that should never happen, and that doesn't happen to programs that are at the high level that Mac Brown should have this Tar Heel program at.
Yeah, and when the story serves, by the way, JMU coming into the year, we have them on Thursday Night Football in a few weeks. I mean, they lost their head coach, Kurt Signetti, to Indiana. He's got Indiana undefeated. A lot of talent went with him and transferred out. So, I mean, they're not the JMU that we saw last year when they were running through the Sun Belt in their first
Yeah.
year at that level. But I do think the fact that look, and maybe Mac was being honest in the locker room saying, guys, I'll walk if I don't get this thing turned around. So I applaud him for that. But in a day and age where everything gets out, there's
Yeah.
the one thing you can't do. And I'm not going to tell Mac Brown how to be a head coach. He's one of the great head coaches of all time. But it is when you hear that, now that stays out there. And
Yeah.
Chris Lowe said, look, he reported that Mac's back at work today. We get it. There were rumblings going on in the afternoon. Did Mac just quit? It was just really bizarre how it went down. And now he's going to have to answer for that now at the press conferences this week.
Yeah, and that's where we are in college football coverage, where anything that has happened becomes part of the narrative, and otherwise we wouldn't be. If they had beaten JMU, none of us would really care until they get to the bigger games on the schedule. And this is, I mean, I don't know what's going on with Mac Brown. He got redemption after Texas fired him.
Yes, he did.
He brought North Carolina to the cusp. I mean, they've been very close to breaking through and becoming a real power. But when you're his age, people look at you a little more cynically, like, what's the deal? And that's where he is right now.
And look, some of those coaches who do get back in will tell you, they're like, look, if it ever gets to a point where I'm in danger of leaving it worse than when I got it, then I will step away because it's a legacy type situation. So it'll be this will be one to keep an eye on in terms of where North Carolina goes the rest of the season, because 70-50 against JMU, credit the Dukes, but that was something that's now gonna get people in Chapel Hill who may have been rumbling about it.
The only good news is he's got a fan base that's a little more laid back than maybe Auburn or somebody else who will have late night meetings. I mean, he's got to clean this up though, and he has to clean it up quickly.
You know who cleaned it up? Dabo. No portal Dabo.
Yeah.
They're humming. Like, look, say what you want about the ACC. I know Stanford went into Syracuse and got to win. Maybe Stanford's an ACC powerhouse now, but Dabo's got it going as well. So to recap, Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate, just some Cliff's notes. Paul was easy on Lincoln Riley, even though they lost. Paul was easy on Prime, even though they won by a Hail Mary. I think this is a Sunday to celebrate a time of change in college football as we go into week 5. Where are you parking the bus this week, by the way?
It has not been made official yet.
Okay.
So
all right.
I'll have to keep you in suspense.
By the way, just by the laugh, I can't wait off air to find out where they're going, because Paul doesn't want to break any ESPN code here on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. Everybody enjoy your week. Week 5, we're going to learn a lot from Paul Finebaum and Matt Barrie. We'll see you next Sunday here on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate.